Thanks again for joining us. I am Carmen Bishop in the Zoning Administration Division, and I'm joined by Jackie Camp, also in Zoning Administration, and Bill Mayland, our Assistant Zoning Administrator. He is also on the line. And thanks for joining us this evening. We are going to cover two topics, two zoning ordinance amendment topics, I should say. So one on battery energy storage systems and one about substations. And we're doing them together because they both are light utility facilities under the zoning ordinance. And while they currently are not on exactly the same time schedule, pretty close. So we felt like it was useful to talk about them somewhat together. With that, I guess I'll say we would like you all to keep your microphones muted while we're presenting, but there will be plenty of time for questions and comments. We're going to do it in two parts. So first, Jackie has a few slides to present, and then we'll stop and do questions and comments on the battery energy storage systems. And then I have a few slides to present on substations, and then we'll do questions on that. And and also I should say, you are welcome to use the chat function as we go along. And then anything that's put in the chat, we'll try to go ahead and also read it out loud and make sure that it's all captured by the recording. So with that, I will let you take it away, Jackie.
Okay, thanks, Carmen. Okay, let me get it so I can see everybody as well. Okay. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Again, my name is Jackie, and I'm a planner with the county's Planning and Development Department in the Zoning Administration Division. The purpose of today's presentation is to provide an introduction and overview of battery energy storage systems, or BESS for short, and share zoning concepts that the county is considering based on a review of other jurisdictions around the country who have implemented zoning ordinance standards for BESS. As Carmen mentioned, at the end of the presentation, we'll have some time for questions and sharing of feedback. And then my last slide provides the project timeline. So I'll go over the next steps of the project and how you can stay updated and involved. So first thing is understanding what is a battery energy storage system, or BESS. It is a technology designed to store and manage energy for later use. It uses rechargeable batteries to store energy from the electrical grid and renewable energy sources like solar or wind power. Several types of batteries are currently used, and new battery chemistries are coming to market. The most used chemistry is the lithium-ion battery. These batteries are used in a variety of devices, from cell phones to electric vehicles to large-scale battery energy storage systems. However, not all lithium batteries use the same chemistry, and they can each present different risks and benefits. For zoning purposes, battery energy storage systems can be either a principal use or an accessory use. BESS that store power that is used solely by a home or a business where the battery is located, such as shown in the first two photos on the right, are accessory to the property's primary use. These systems can vary in size and can range from as small as a residential circuit breaker to as large as outdoor HVAC equipment. Typically, BESS that are considered a principal use are either standalone battery systems that serve to enhance performance and resilience of the local electric system by charging from and discharging directly into the electrical grid, or systems that are integrated with wholesale energy generation, such as solar and wind facilities. Energy storage has a variety of benefits, as it can make the electric grid more clean, flexible, and reliable. Because solar and wind, for example, can be inconsistent depending on weather conditions or the time of the day, BESS can store that surplus energy produced during high wind conditions and when the sun is out, and release that energy during the night or in low wind conditions. BESS can provide a more stable energy supply, making renewable energy more viable and can reduce reliance on fossil fuel-based power. One of the most significant advantages of BESS is its ability to store excess energy during off-peak hours and release it when demand spikes. By storing electricity during periods of low demand when rates are cheaper and using it during peak demand when prices are higher, users can lower their overall electricity bills. Lastly, for critical infrastructure such as hospitals and emergency services, BESS can provide essential backup power during outages. So where are BESS typically located? What we learned is that BESS can connect to the grid either through distribution lines serving local utility customers, transmission lines linking distribution systems with distant power plants, or co-located with solar and wind power systems. Overall, batteries are a unique class of energy system infrastructure. They are modular and can be configured in virtually any size. They also have limited infrastructure requirements for their placement on property, needing just a concrete pad to sit on and connection to the electric grid. These two factors, modularity and limited infrastructure, means that a BESS can be built many places, including near commercial and residential uses. Regarding the existing guidelines in the county's comprehensive policy plan, if a BESS was proposed today in Fairfax, it would typically require a Public Facilities 2232 review with a public hearing, and in some districts require a special exception approval. The 2232 is a process that determines the compatibility of a proposed public facility with locational guidelines that are established in the plan. So the county's policy plan, objectives, and policies for a proposed electrical facilities include those listed here, such as environmental considerations, co-location with other electrical infrastructure, location, noise, screening, and safety, undergrounding lines whenever possible. Regarding existing zoning regulations, a proposed BESS facility would be part of the electrical distribution system and would be considered a light utility facility use in the zoning ordinance. Currently, a light utility facility is not allowed in the I and RA districts. It is allowed by right in the I3, I4, I5, and I6 districts, and would require a special exception in all other districts. And then for our P or plan districts, except for the PCC, it would be required to be part of the development plan or would need a special exception approval. Now I'll go over our initial amendment considerations based on our research reviewing other zoning ordinances and BESS resources. We are considering revising our current light utility facility definition to include large-scale BESS as part of that definition. We want to also consider appropriate and necessary locations for large-scale battery energy storage systems, thinking about whether by right facilities be limited to the I5 and I6, those industrial heavy industrial districts, with a special exception approval process allowed in most other zoning districts. We're also looking at how we've seen in other jurisdictions that zoning ordinances have differentiated smaller scale BESS, such as the accessory ones we discussed earlier for residential and small commercial, to those that are those larger scale kind of utility used BESS by a specific size of the battery energy storage system. So we'd like to consider that concept and see what size threshold is appropriate that would differentiate the residential, small commercial accessory uses from the larger scale BESS uses that would trigger the zoning ordinance standards. From the jurisdictional research, some communities have applied additional screening or larger setbacks to limit visibility from residential and commercial zones. Fencing of at least 6 to 8 feet is commonly required, as well as more layers of natural screening. We've seen setbacks range from 25 to 100 feet from property lines, buildings, and roads. We've seen them vary by location, system size, and zoning district. With our review of other zoning ordinances, we would like to consider adding best specific standards for setbacks, fencing, landscaping, screening, and potentially noise requirements for this amendment. As we're thinking existing standards for height, lighting, and signage for the underlying zoning district that it's proposed in would most likely suffice. We're also looking at standards to consider the treatment of power lines placed underground and co-location if it's possible, reflecting those comprehensive plan policies. Now, a little bit about safety and environmental. While BESS do not emit gases or release pollutants to the air or waterways during normal operation, there is the potential for a battery cell to rupture and vent flammable gases that can start a fire. The safety of lithium-ion BESS is a common concern, especially given reports of BESS fires that have drawn public attention in other parts of the country. However, these incidences have also driven the industry to improve its understanding of the issues and develop more robust mitigation measures, codes, and standards. Local jurisdictions that we've reviewed have enhanced their safety by requiring detailed safety plans and reports during project approval and involving local emergency response officials in fire and emergency response planning. We are working with the Fire Marshal's office on what safety requirements should be considered for this zoning amendment, such as potentially hazard mitigation assessments and emergency response training. Another common standard is decommissioning of the site once it is no longer needed, along with a financial security requirement that shows that to implement that decommissioning plan. And also requiring liability insurance is another option that could be on the table. Here is the project timeline. In January, we presented the same information of initial research and amendment concepts to the board's Land Use Policy Committee and the Planning Commission's Infrastructure Committee, and are providing that same information today for the public's understanding and feedback and comment. After these community meetings, we will begin drafting zoning standards to present to the Board of Supervisors Land Use Policy Committee, the Planning Commission's Infrastructure Committee, and the public in June. The board and the Planning Commission's committee meetings are open to the public and are also broadcast live on Channel 16 and on demand. And upcoming community meetings like this one today, where we'll present that draft text, will be held virtually. Public hearings before the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors for the BESS zoning amendment are tentatively planned for the fall of 2025. All hearings will include opportunities for the public to submit written or oral testimony for the board and our Planning Commission's consideration. To stay updated on the progress of the project, you can check the project webpage I have listed here. It also includes an FAQ document that provides similar information that was shared and presented today, but kind of in a handout form. You can also sign up for email updates. So if you sign up for the zoning amendment email updates, you'll get notified when there's any upcoming news or meetings for the county zoning amendments that are coming through. And then, of course, please feel free to email me with any questions or comments. I'm happy to take questions now, but if something comes up later for you after the meeting, please feel free to email me then. Okay, well, I'm going to stop there and see what questions we may have. It looks like there's some in the chat, perhaps. Okay. Okay, I'm going to start kind of at the top there. I see, is there any way to see the draft amendment before the public hearing in September? And that's from David. Great question. Yes. So our schedule has that we're going to be presenting that draft text to the public in June. So we're going to have similar types of community meetings like we're having tonight, where we'll have posted the draft text and we'll discuss it and have you have the ability to ask questions or provide us comment. We're also going to, at that same kind of time frame, be presenting to the Planning Commission's Infrastructure Committee and the board's Land Use Policy Committee for their review and feedback. And then once we get that, then we'll move forward with the public hearing process that will follow that. So yes, there will be time to comment and see that. And thank you, Carmen. I see that you already did that. Okay. The draft. Okay, look, Carmen, you helped me out here. Thank you. Okay, so it looks like Carmen responded that yes, the draft could, the text is prepared to go so that we can receive feedback. And I think there was a comment back from David. Good. My major concern is that we won't yet know all the things that can go wrong with Bess. Moss Landing was only a few years old, and yet it is said that they would not be approved now. I would be interested in seeing where the new rules forbid a new Moss Landing. Because of the tremendous danger of a BESS, it should always require a special exception and should not be counted as a light utility facility. How will the millions of gallons of water required to fight a BESS fire impact resource preservation areas that are adjacent? Would that be a zoning issue or a planning issue? Good questions. So definitely, we are working closely, like I said, with the fire marshal's office on emergency planning and safety response for battery energy storage systems. So I know the fire marshal has spoken about that during our meetings with the board and the planning commission. And of course, he'll be weighing in. I'm sure he'll be available during the future committee meetings as well. For the resource preservation area, I think that's kind of similar. We'll be coordinating with the fire marshal's office and planning on, how these will be reviewed and make sure that any impact is mitigated and that these are as safe as can be for our community.
Hey, Jackie, on the question about the permissions. So, David, you mentioned that you think it should always require a special exception and should not be counted as a light utility facility. So, we'll see what the draft text and how it's structured once we have that together. But even if it is a light utility facility under the zoning ordinance, that doesn't mean that it wouldn't necessarily require a special exception, that the permissions within that use, they already do vary according to the specific type. And so that could be the case as well. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Right. I understand that. And thank you for that. I just, I can see where transformers could be part of a light utility. They don't store energy. They can explode because of overweight, but they don't have a whole bunch of energy in them. But my issue with BESS is that they do contain a lot of energy, which can then cause a problem. So I think they're really not the same as transformers or as a transformer yard. That's my concern.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Oh, yes. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. So when will all these slides be available?
We will, after tonight, tomorrow, Carmen and I will be working with the web team, and so we'll get them posted as soon as we can.
Thank you much.
Yep, absolutely.
Nick Gardner here on the phone. Quick question. If these were to be installed in the county, would they be owned by the county or owned by the utility?
Good question. Not owned by the county. They could be a private entity that owns them and then coordinates the power with the local electrical utility. Dominion Energy, it has, a lot of Fairfax County, or it could be a local electrical utility that owns and manages it, but not the county.
Okay. So would county regulations allow these to be privately owned and not necessarily owned by Dominion? Or could we see small power companies or groups, if you will, pop up that are able to sell power?
Well, what we've learned from the Virginia Clean Economy Act that was adopted a few years ago, that in the act gave a specific target to the two kind of large utilities in the state, one being Dominion Energy. And part of that act had a requirement that a percentage had to be owned by a private entity that then would coordinate with the local Dominion Energy to either contract that power, or there an agreement that would have to be made. But they do have that in the act, as there could be private entities that develop and operate the battery energy storage system with coordination with the local utility.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you all.
Right. So I'm going to move into the substations, and I just have a few slides, and then there'll be time for questions about substations, or if you think of a new question about battery energy storage systems, that's fine too. So just 1 minute. Right. Oh, I did it again. Did that last night. All right. Okay, so for the project timeline, substations, it is on the zoning ordinance work program, and we've been researching the topic. And like the battery energy storage systems, substations was presented to the board's land use policy committee and the planning commission's infrastructure committee in January. And those meetings, they are recorded and they're available online if you want to see the presentation, which is a little bit longer than what I'm doing tonight. And also, if you want to hear the board and the planning commission's questions and discussion on these topics. And since then, we've been doing additional research and have developed draft amendment text, and that text is posted on our website and available for review. And if you haven't had a chance, I hope you will review it and send me comments, because the next stop is hopefully authorization. And what authorization is it's the board saying that we can schedule public hearings. And so I'm hoping for authorization on June 10th. And if the board does authorize it, then public hearings could be scheduled tentatively for July, I think it's July 16th for the Planning Commission public hearing, and August 26th for the board's public hearing. Substations are part of the energy network. They connect transmission lines. There are two types of substations. Transmission stations assist with moving bulk electricity over long distances, and distribution stations bring that power down to the distribution level to get it to the end user. Both Dominion and Novec have indicated that ideally they look for properties in the 15 to 16 acre size, but that size can definitely vary. We have some substations in Fairfax that are on lots under 5 acres, and Dominion has indicated that a substation could occupy up to 30 to 40 acres. They include various equipment, and the height of that equipment varies. So in one application, for instance, it was noted that the circuit breakers would be 15 feet high, the transformers 29 feet high, and the static poles and backbone structures would be 75 feet high. We've had other recent applications that were adding 95-foot high transmission poles. Typically, substations also have security fencing, and that fencing can range from a 10 to 12 foot high chain link fence to a taller or even decorative wall, or even a building type enclosure. So the trend in recent years here has been for substations that are either upgrading older facilities or for new substations to support data center development. So electrical substations, they are considered light utility facilities under the zoning ordinance. These are facilities that are part of the distribution of utility services. And I'm not going to go over the permissions because they are the same as what Jackie just covered a minute ago for the BESS, and similar to the BESS, substation also requires a 2232 review under state code, and that requires approval by the Planning Commission. And where both a special exception in some districts is required, and a 2232 is required. If they're both required, then they're generally processed concurrently. The current use standards in the zoning ordinance, they specify that lot size and bulk regulations do not apply to light utility facilities. Electrical substations are also not subject to your maximum fence height limits. In the residential districts, so all of those substations are coming through a special exception process. The board has defined that there's no alternative site in a commercial or an industrial district within 500 feet for a distribution station or 1 mile for a transmission station. The zoning ordinance also requires transitional screening, that's landscaping. The type 2 is required. It's a 35-foot wide buffer next to residential uses, and also a minimum 6-foot high solid fence or wall next to residential. So for the draft amendment text, it does include revised permissions and standards. The permissions with that text show that it could be revised to limit your by right substations to I-5 and I-6. Those are our most intense industrial districts. And then an SE could also be allowed in I-5 and I-6 to modify standards. And then otherwise an SE would be required in all other districts. And so what this is doing, it is changing the permissions in I-3 and I-4 from by right to special exception. And also it's removing the development plan approval process option for the planned districts. And so in the planned districts, it would also always require a special exception. And then we could also add in the PCC district, which is the only planned district that currently wouldn't allow a substation. And for these standards, these are intended to address visual and potential noise impacts. The current exemption from zoning district setbacks could be removed, and then additional setbacks could be required for new or expanded substations from adjacent residential, commercial, and public or private streets. And then screening within those setbacks could be required to include a visually solid fence or wall, as well as landscaping. And the setbacks and screening, by placing them as we're showing in the use standards, they could not be modified administratively, but they could be modified with special exception approval. And the standard that I mentioned before about the review for alternative sites when it's proposed within a residential area, that could be revised to be consistent for all types of substations. So instead of the 500 feet for a distribution station and 1 mile for a transmission station, we could have a single distance, perhaps a half a mile, could be considered for all substations. And then also, we could add a provision that would allow consideration of expansion or co-location if it would minimize impacts on the residential area. And then also, if you've taken a look at the draft text, you'll see there are a lot of other various edits and organizational changes that we've incorporated. And so that's all I have for my presentation this evening. We do have a website up, and we'll be continuing to add information there, including the recordings from these meetings. And my email address is there, and you're welcome to reach out anytime with questions. And so let's see, are there anything in the chat yet? Not yet. Does anybody have any questions or comments that you would like to make? Tyler, I see you put your camera on. You haven't put your hand up yet, but I'm wondering.
I do. I just didn't want to. I wanted to give others an opportunity first. But I'm happy to. I have a few comments and a few questions, and I'm happy to ask a few and then give others a chance. I really appreciate the inclusion of I3 and I4 moving from by right to special exception. I think that's a really significant impact that will benefit residents and kind of the impacts of substations for residents. And so I really appreciate that. Also, since it allows the ability for kind of public hearings, which and provides the public another opportunity to engage in that. Also really great to see the inclusion for setbacks, landscaping and barrier requirements. I've got a few recommendations kind of in terms of the setbacks going a little farther, but kind of those are, I think, really great additions. Some of the kind of recommendations that I had were to maintain the 1 mile distance for substation co-location or expansion, and also to add text to include any district adjacent to an R district or a property developed with a residential use. I think there's lots of situations around the county where a substation could probably be placed in a industrial area that is also directly adjacent to a residential area, but there may also be a much more suitable location for a substation away from residents in another area. And so I think it should be considered kind of, if the goal is to avoid the impact of substations on residents, that if there's a suitable substation co-location elsewhere, that should also be applied to areas that are directly adjacent to residents
I'm
as
sorry.
well.
Can I might need you to back up and kind of say that again. I didn't quite follow you.
Sure. So I think by limiting the 1 mile distance to a half a mile for the co-location or expansion of substations, my understanding is that that means that if there is a alternate location that a substation could be co-located within a mile, that's the preference instead of kind of a new substation in a certain location. Is that correct?
So yes, so we want there's the review for alternative sites. So if they're wanting to propose a substation in a residential area, they should be looking to see, is there a suitable location in a commercial or industrial district? And then we're also trying to add in consideration that if maybe expanding an existing substation actually would result in fewer impacts to the residential, because maybe new transmission lines are needed, or there could be other reasons why this other location, while it could work, it actually is worse for the residential. So that's what we're trying to capture, that idea.
And so I think my recommendation then would be to stick with the 1 mile distance, because I feel like if you reduce it to a half a mile, then you're gonna create more areas in which substations could otherwise go in residential areas. My other recommendation related to that would be to expand this provision not just to residential areas, but to propose sites that are directly adjacent to residential areas. So not all I5s or I6s are all industrial, but ones that directly border a residential area, because if the goal is to avoid substations in residential districts, the county's history of planning and development has resulted in a lot of these areas right next to each other. And so I think that should be that's one way to avoid situations where alternatives could very well exist for substations elsewhere.
Okay, thank you.
But
That was the part that I didn't quite
yeah,
follow the first time, but now I understand the adjacent to residential.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. I'll stop there and see if others have others.
Previously, I saw you had your hand up, David.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for doing all this stuff. I guess it's your job, but you know, whatever.
It is. But yeah. Thank you for coming. I mean, I have to admit, I probably wouldn't use my Tuesday evening to attend this kind of a meeting. Anyone else? Any questions or comments? Have you had a chance to look at the draft text? I can tell Tyler has looked at it. Well, if you haven't, I hope you will. It's a great read.
I do have a few other just specific questions, if that's all right. I had a question around kind of the height of substation fences or walls, and kind of noted that it references that they typically vary between like 12 and 25 feet or more, and that I noticed it said the height and materials are determined for each site based on kind of zoning requirements and security considerations. My specific question is, so if 12 foot's the minimum, is it anticipated that kind of through the special exception process, like the county staff, planning commission, and board of supervisors could encourage a higher height to fit kind of the specific scenario or kind of proposal? Is that
Absolutely.
okay?
And, you know, just every location is different. And
Yeah.
so we have some substations where they have definitely taller walls. I know, for instance, the Idlewood substation was expanded, and that's in a residential area, and it has a wall that's 16 to 20 feet in height, and it's brick, and that's because that location matters, right?
And would the county then typically provide those types of recommendations, like in the staff report or through the planning commission recommendations, like, or is 12 foot always going to be kind of used as the kind of starting point, I guess?
So the way it is worded in the draft text, then 12 feet would be the starting point, but depending on the location, then a taller wall may be what's needed. So
okay. And then how would that apply, or how would a taller walls be able to be achieved in by right situations?
It would. I mean, it could happen if they wanted to, I should say.
Okay. Which
but
I
it
think
wouldn't be required.
Goes back to further justification for why a special exception should be required if there's a I-5 or I-6 that's directly adjacent to a residential situation. I would provide that recommendation. And then my other question was related to whether you consider the difference between kind of high voltage substations and kind of lower voltage substations. Obviously, the higher voltage substations, like those related most to data centers, I think have a greater impact, which may call for kind of greater setbacks or other kind of considerations. And so I didn't know if kind of that was considered at all in kind of the proposed text.
Well, I'd like to hear your thoughts as to, you know, what you're thinking about the difference in the impacts, because I will say the current zoning ordinance standards have some differences, as I mentioned, between the distribution and what's referred to as a transformer station in the current ordinance, but I believe it's intended to mean what we're currently usually referred to as a transmission station. But even what can be a distribution station, such as you mentioned next to a data center, that's a distribution station. But I think that if you live near it, you might still find it to be impactful. And so the draft text actually removes distinctions between the two types, and that they all should be mitigated. And They all can have the high equipment. You can even have your 95-foot high pole at a distribution station. So I feel like the impacts can be quite similar. And so it's actually removes the distinctions. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I did some research looking at what other jurisdictions kind of treat kind of what they call high voltage versus low voltage, and I think they're still both distribution centers, but a lot of them set kind of the limit of like distribution kind of above 69 kilowatts or 100 kilowatts and kind of above and below, and a lot of jurisdictions have set different distance requirements and things like that as it relates to, I think, kind of potentially, I think you mentioned like the height of the like the back brace thing or whatever that was called. I think the more voltage requires kind of bigger fans and stuff related to noise and things like that. I'm happy to send you, Carmen, kind of the list of jurisdictions that I found that kind of have a higher setback as a result of that. So that kind of was my just knowing that other jurisdictions make that differentiation, whether it's distribution or transmission based on the voltage level, was just curious.
Yeah.
So
I've seen a lot that also don't make distinctions. But I'm happy to take a look at anything you send and would like to do that. I will also add that we are continuing to look into potential noise impacts. And so there may be additional revisions based on that.
And that was one of my other questions too, was whether you anticipate kind of the noise changes would kind of be on a similar timeline as this or come after this, or just do you have any sense of that right now?
We actually have engaged an acoustical consultant and we'll be receiving input from them very shortly. And so it'll be based on that, we'll need to take a look at whether additional standards should be developed. And so that's information that we have some for substations and some for that'll be coming for BESS.
Awesome. And then I think my last question was, I noticed that the exemption for, I think, substations and all light utilities from complying with the building height or floor area ratio, in addition to the exemption for lot size, was added language. And I was just wondering if you could elaborate on kind of what the intent was or kind of purpose was for that.
Yeah, so what that text is actually doing is it's removing the exemption from zoning district setbacks.
Okay.
So before it currently they're exempt from all lot size and bulk regulations. And so now we've just added in the words that we're keeping, but the word that's missing is setbacks. So now wherever there's a zoning district setback, and it depends on the zoning district what it is. But whatever it is, they would have to comply with that.
Okay. Oh, so yeah, that seems like a really good inclusion. One other question related to setbacks and the landscaping requirement. I just didn't know if the landscaping requirement is like within kind of the setback or in addition to the setback in terms of like the 100 feet and then whatever feet for the landscaping. Are those combined to be a total 100 feet or separated out?
They could be combined. So, the idea is then the landscaping could be within the setback. Now, let's say it didn't work out. Maybe they've got a lot of easements or other reasons why they can't provide the landscaping within the setback, then they might need to go further back, right? Because as I mentioned, by placing the standards in the use standards, they can't be administratively modified. So they would need to get a special exception, or maybe they can push it further back because sometimes there are easements or other things that would preclude planting of trees.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That was all I had.
Anyone else? All right. Well, If you think of additional questions or comments, please reach out to me or Jackie. Just to remind everyone of our next steps, Jackie will be presenting to the Planning Commission and the board committees and having additional community meetings, most likely in June. So that'll be here before we know it. And then hopefully we'll be bringing the Substations amendment forward for authorization in June and then public hearings in July and August. So we hope you'll stay tuned and please reach out with any questions or comments. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.